All right, so here's the book we're going to read, The Bunyans. It's a tall tale, and as I read, I want you to listen for those traits that we just talked about. So, The Bunyans. Now, I suppose you've heard about the mighty logger Paul Bunyan and his great blue ox named Babe. In the early days of our country, Paul and Babe cleared the land for the settlers, so farms and cities could spring up. And you probably know that Paul was taller than a redwood tree, stronger than 50 grizzly bear, and smarter than a library full of books. But you may not know that Paul was married and had 2 fine children. One day when Paul Bunyan was out clearing a road through the forest of Kentucky, a great pounding began to shake the earth. Looking around, Paul discovered an enormous hole in the side of a hill. The lumberjack pulled up an acre of dry cane and fashioned a torch to light his way. Paul climbed into the hole and followed the sound underground for miles until he came to a large cavern glistening with crystals. By the flickering light of his torch, he saw a gigantic woman banging a behemoth pickaxe against a wall. It was love at first sight. "I'm Carrie McIntyre," the gigantic woman said. "I was sitting on the hill when my lucky wishbone fell down a crack in the earth. I've been digging all day trying to find it." With a grin on her face as wide as the Missouri River, Paul reached into his shirt pocket. "I've got one too," he said, pulling out his lucky wishbone. "Marry me, Carrie, and we'll share mine." Carrie agreed, and their wedding invitations were mailed out right away. The invitations were so large, only one needed to be sent to each state. Everyone could read them for miles. The invitation said, "You are cordially invited to the mammoth wedding of Paul Bunyan and Carrie McIntyre." The couple were married in the enormous crystal chamber that Carrie had carved, and after the ceremony, folks began to call it Mammoth Cave. The giantess had dug more than 200 miles, making it the longest cave in the world, so the name fit perfectly. Paul and Carrie settled down on the farm in Maine, and soon there were 2 new Bunyans. While Paul Bunyan carved with his logging crew, Ma Bunyan worked on the farm and cared for their jumbo boy named Little Jean and their gigantic girl named Teeny. Those names are kind of funny, aren't they? They don't really match their size. One morning when Paul Bunyan was home between jobs, Ma Bunyan cooked up a hearty breakfast of pancakes and syrup. Teeny was wrestling with her big purple puma named Slink and accidentally dumped a silo of syrup on her head. Teeny's hair was so sweet bears crawled into it and burrowed deep in her curls. Try as they might, Pa and Ma Bunyan couldn't wash them out. "We'll need a forceful shower of water to get rid of those varmints," Ma Bunyan declared. You see the bears in her hair? Those little bears in her hair. Paul Bunyan had an idea. He placed his daughter on Babe and led them to the Niagara River in Canada. The gargantuan father scooped up a huge hole in the middle of the riverbed. As the giant river roared down the deep hole, Teeny cried out in delight, "Niagara Falls!" Teeny showered in the waterfall, and the pesky bears were washed downstream. When little Jean was 5, he wanted to work too, so he followed his pa out to his logging camp in Montana. Thinking his son was too young to do much of anything, Pa set little Jean down in a barren canyon in Utah to play for the day. When the lumberjack went to fetch him, he couldn't believe his eyes. Little Jean had carved the canyon into a wonderland of fanciful shapes. Paul Bunyan got tongue-tied and said, "That's a mighty Bryce Nanyan, coy. A mighty nice canyon, boy." Somehow, part of the mix-up stuck, and to this day the canyon is known as Bryce Canyon. After all that sculpting, little Jean's shoes were full of sand. Pa knew Ma Bunyan wouldn't want her clean floors dirtied up, so he told little Jean to sit down and empty out his shoes. The sand from little Jean's shoes blew away to the east on the eastern wind and settled down a state away. It covered a valley 10 miles long, making sand dunes 800 feet high. Everyone knows that's how the great sand dunes of Colorado came to be. One summer, little Jean and Teeny wanted to go to the beach. Ma Bunyan told them to follow the river to the ocean. But all the rivers flowed west back then, so they missed the Atlantic Ocean and ended up on the other side of the country instead. Ma Bunyan tracked them out to the Pacific Ocean, where she found Teeny riding on the back of 2 blue whales and little Jean carving out 50 zigzag miles of the California coast. When Ma Bunyan saw that what her son had done, she exclaimed, What's the big idea, sir?" From that time on, scenic area was known as Big Sur. Ma Bunyan knew that she had to put up a barrier to remind her children not to wander off too far. So on the way home, everyone pitched in and built the Rocky Mountains. Teeny gathered up and sorted out all the rivers, letting them flow east and others west. After that, the children had no trouble following the eastern rivers down to the Atlantic Ocean. And when they wanted to go out exploring, Ma Bunyan would call out, "Now don't cross the continental divide, children." The best thing about camping is sleeping outdoors, and the worst thing is not having enough hot water. That's why the Bunyans always camped in Wyoming. By the time their camping years were over, Ma Bunyan had poked more than 300 holes in the ground with her pickaxe and released tons of hot water from geysers. But Ma got tired of poking so many holes, so she made a geyser that blew every hour on the hour. After that, there was a steady supply of hot water to keep the giant's clothes and dishes sparkling clean. Teeny named the geyser Old Faithful, and to this day Old Faithful still blows its top every hour at Yellowstone National Park. As our great country grew up, so did the Bunyan children. When the kids left home, Ma and Pa Bunyan retired to the wilderness area, where they still lived happily. Teeny hitched a ride on the whale over to England and became a famous fashion designer. Her colorful skirts made from hot air balloons and her breezy blouses cut from ship sails were the sensation at the first World's Fair in London. Little Jean traveled to Venice, Italy, where he studied astronomy and art. Every day, the gondoliers would take their passengers down the Great Canal to watch the giant artist chiseling his marble sculptures. After graduation, little Jean decided to explore new lands, as his parents had done, so he took 2 great jumps and 1 flying leap and bounded up into outer space. In 1976, the year of our country's bicentennial, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration sent a spacecraft named Viking 1 on a mission to study Mars. The spacecraft took many photographs of the surface of the planet. One mysterious photo looked like a face carved out of a colossal rock. Some say the photograph is not a face, but an illusion caused by light and shadows on the rock. Others think the famous Martian face is just the spitting image of little Jean Bunyan. If that's so, who knows what he's up to on other states? Only time will tell. So as I read, what traits did you hear about the tall tale? And was there any part of the book that you thought was really funny, that took the truth and stretched it so it was a little silly? And how was the truth stretched? If you think back and watch back into the book, how did they take the truth of what you and I can do, but stretched it so that it was made up? Think about those questions and then move on.